Hi, my name is Michael Shea, and I'm Michael Shea Teaching. You've probably seen me on my website. One of the most frequently asked questions that we get regarding the nature of the work that I teach and that my teaching team with Valerie Gora teaches is, what is the difference, precisely or as precisely as possible, between biodynamic craniosacral therapy and other forms of craniosacral therapy? Well, first of all, we probably need a little bit of a history lesson in terms of the background and the actual origin of craniosacral therapy, because it derived from, as many of you know already, the work of Dr. Sutherland. Now, Dr. Sutherland was an osteopath, and he was the founder of what is called osteopathy in the cranial field. So the original cranial work that was taught was called biomechanical work. Now, this is the work that was taught in the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, and I must say it's even taught nowadays, where a certain amount of force, a certain amount of pressure is placed on the head, and usually various places on the head, the frontal bone, for example, the frontal lift, the parietal lift, where the bilateral contact with the hands on the head, and there's pressure put into these bones and put into the sutures in order to make them stretch, to lift, so to speak, and even to go through a variety of motions. Well, what happened in the 1940s and 1950s is that gradually the results that these osteopaths that were getting from their clients was remarkable. And they realized that something systemic was happening with the entire body, not just locally at the cranium or at the sacrum where they might be holding, or the other parts, other joints in the body where they were applying these cranial type pressures in order to manipulate the bones and the membranes. So basically, the next evolution of the work was called functional work. And the functional work was where they would put their hands on one location, whether it was the head, the sacrum, part of the body, and they would work locally, but they would start sensing what was happening throughout the body. They would start sensing holistically or systemically. But the nature of the work, whether it was biomechanical or functional, was still to get that local part to move, and it was still oriented around tissues and membranes. Okay? So if you're with me so far, we've got biomechanical work, and it still exists. We've got functional work, which has been integrated now pretty well in many different types and forms of craniosacral therapy. Well, Dr. Sutherland, when he was 76 years old, it was very interesting because it was in the year I was born, in 1948. It's when he had perhaps his most seminal discovery about the whole nature of the work. And he had his hands on a client, and he realized at that very moment that there was a force inherent within the fluids of the body. And of course, nowadays, many people think that that's the cerebrospinal fluid that he was referring to, but that there was a force inherent in the fluids, whether it was the cerebrospinal fluid or not. And this force was actually making the correction. It had nothing to do with the way in which Sutherland was actually touching the body. He was merely observing and listening to a correction being made on the inside of the body, and thus the biodynamic model was born. Well, what does this mean? It means that what's happening is that there is a force in the fluids of the body, and we could say it's not only located in the cerebrospinal fluid, but it's actually located in every fluid and all the fluids together. And it's called primary respiration in the long type. So in our next video, I'd like to talk more about the long type and primary respiration. Thank you.